I'm Jessica Tremontana with Consumers Energy.
All right, and it is a couple minutes after 8:30, so let's go ahead and get the show on the road on this beautiful Wednesday morning. So I'd like to welcome everybody to our virtual roundtable here this morning. This is the third of the three that we're doing this fall. You know, it's been a great series. For this re-engaging the rural economy virtual roundtables. We had such a positive response to the first 7 sessions that we did back in May that we lined up these 3 interactive sessions to close out what has been a dynamite 2020 for all of us, I'm sure. And as you know, today's focus is on activating rural entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, in a lot of ways, it feels like we're back to the same place we were this spring with spiking COVID numbers and increasing restrictions. Now, that said, these sessions are really all about helping our rural economies be as resilient and prosperous as possible amidst all the different challenges out there. So I definitely do encourage everybody to check out the series of sessions we did back in May, as they're now very relevant and impactful yet again. We will send a link to those recordings in the follow-up email after this session, and those topics focused on a wide array of business sectors, including manufacturing, HR and talent, community leadership, independent retail, dining establishment, service business, and also rural tourism, which was really interesting. My name is Travis Alden, Director of Business Development at The Right Place and the lead for our small but mighty rural team. And as a quick kind of introduction for today, we really realize the value of connecting all of you with your peers, not just locally, but regionally as well. So, you know, we all work in areas of West Michigan and certainly have many things in common. So really the goal for today is to learn from each other and to be an interactive discussion as much as possible and not a sit and get kind of webinar that I know we're all kind of burned out on. So while we can't physically be together this morning, let's kind of pretend that we are and turn our videos on. I realize that sometimes it's easy to just kind of click it off and multitask, but it definitely makes things more interactive if we can all be on screen, if you're comfortable with that. And just to kind of keep it going, really the more we can share ideas and learn from each other, the more successful we'll all be and the more value we'll get out of this time this morning. We really value regional collaboration at The Right Place, especially for our rural efforts. Most of you may know that Michigan is broken up into 10 prosperity regions that map there on the right-hand side. And the West Michigan region, Region 4, which encompasses those 13 counties there, that's where we're located, obviously. And the 6 counties on the left-hand side that are in red, those are the ones that The Right Place serves directly. And with that, I'd like to introduce our small but mighty rural team from The Right Place and our special co-host for today. So Julie, Jody, and Kathy Jo, you guys want to say hi real quick this morning?
Good morning, everyone. Julie Burrell, supporting Newaygo County.
Morning, Jody Nichols, working in Oceana and Lake counties.
And good morning, Kathy Jo Vanderlaan, serving Montcalm County.
And I apologize, I have an error on my slide here. This is from our one from last week for talent innovation. So I'm gonna move that one and introduce our co-hosts here today. So Megan and Brian and the other Brian, you guys wanna say hi real quick this morning?
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Josefovich with Sportsman's Restaurant, the Mitten Bar, and Barley and Rye.
Hey everyone, thanks Travis and The Right Place for the opportunity to be here. My name is Brian Stratton. I live in Caledonia, Michigan, and I'm the co-founder of a technology startup called Sipsy.com that's working to disrupt the way we recycle our cans and bottles here in Michigan. And I'm just excited to be here. Look forward to the discussion.
And then my colleagues, Julie and Jody, will also be presenting today about the Pitch North and Grow North program that they've spearheaded in the counties that they serve. So thank you all for being here this morning. And I would also like to finally take this opportunity to thank Consumers Energy for their support of our Rural Roundtable series this fall. And Jessica has already said hi, but Jessica, you want a couple minutes to say a few words?
Sure, thanks Travis, and good morning. I'm Jessica Tremontana, as Travis said. I work at Consumers Energy and I'm the Community Affairs Manager. So in English, what that means is I'm the conduit from community to company and vice versa, from company to community. So some of you may recognize my face. I cover Ionia County, Ingham, Eaton, and now Clinton counties. I heard Ludington, we have Eric Gustad up in Mason County, and we have Rick Taudeman who covers, I heard, in Whitehall. So he's over in Muskegon area. But, you know, we have a team across the state, and we're really working hard to help small businesses, especially during this time. We recognize and consumers recognize the challenges that businesses, not just in big cities, but in rural communities are really facing. And we're working hard to try to figure out how can we help these businesses stay afloat. I mean, this is, you know, you keep hearing the word unprecedented, but in so many ways, 2020 has just continued to throw curveball after curveball at people. Me, for instance, I'm homeschooling my children unexpectedly, and I have a 6 and 8-year-old at home right now. That sounds like they're running downstairs. So we want to be cognizant of that. We want to provide a lifeline to small businesses and help however we can. So a program that we're about to get off the ground is partnering with a lot of chambers and DDAs across the state. We weren't able to support every single community, but I believe 55 different chambers and DDAs are going to partner with us. And some of you may be familiar with Community Cash or Chamber Bucks. It's a program where if you buy $20 in gift cards at your local chamber or DDA, sometimes there's a small match provided. Consumers is going to work with 55 DDAs and chambers across the state to provide a one-to-one match. Some chambers, we gave chambers the flexibility and DDAs to do whatever they want. So we said, you know, it's up to you. We recommend providing some type of guidelines or limits. So for instance, in Traverse City, if you buy the chamber bucks there, they have a $100 cap. So they'll match your dollar for dollar up to $100. So it's something to keep an eye out in communities across the state. I know Whitehall is participating, Ionia is participating, Portland. So we are trying to provide materials to help these different organizations promote this program and try to help infuse cash to local businesses, especially this time of year, to try to help keep them going through the holidays and hopefully into 2021 when there are better times. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to connect with me through Travis or shoot me a chat. And Travis, thank you so much for coordinating this program. I think it's so important to help provide these resources to rural communities, and I really am proud to be able to support it and to be here today.
Yeah, and thanks so much, Jessica, and to consumers as a whole. I mean, you guys have been, you know, you guys are always great partners in the economic development space, and especially this year, you know, with all the COVID-19 challenges out there. So we certainly appreciate your partnership in West Michigan and statewide. So thank you very much. So just a couple of housekeeping rules before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's discussion. Once we, if anybody has any questions come up or that sort of thing during the conversation, feel free to just kind of shoot them into the chat there. I'll kind of moderate any ones that I get through the chat, or even send them to me privately. That's fine. Or there's going to be opportunities to just kind of make it, you know, open floor, and people can, you know, unmute themselves and ask questions there. These have tended to go pretty smoothly that way. So I'm really looking forward to that. And just kind of set the stage for today's discussion. You know, economic downturns can provide opportunities for entrepreneurship and for business startups and communities. There's even a lot of experts out there that are predicting that the post-COVID economy could really be the next golden age for entrepreneurship in the United States. And rural communities can potentially be really, really well positioned to capitalize on this opportunity now more than ever, especially because of the trends we're seeing with technology, residents leaving metro areas into areas with, you know, kind of better quality of life that we all enjoy in rural areas, and really kind of the rise of remote work as well. So today we have some really successful entrepreneurs in a couple of very diverse sectors to tell their story. As like I mentioned, and two of my colleagues at the right place to talk about some innovative entrepreneur support programs that they have spearheaded right here in rural West Michigan. So hopefully we'll all leave today's roundtable with some great ideas to support the entrepreneurs in our community and be as welcoming as possible to what could be the next successful business startup in our town. So with that, I'd like to, they've already introduced themselves, but Megan and Brian, I think of them as the Mitten Bar and Barley and Rye, but you guys reminded me that it's also Sportsman's as well. especially when I was up in Manistee for about 7 years. I was able to kind of observe what they had built in downtown Ludington there, and really kind of become an anchor, not just for the community, but for the region as well. And I know you guys really focus on being kind of the third place of the community and that sort of thing. But you know, the awards that you guys have won and that sort of thing is really something to be proud of. And when I think of somebody who any community would love to have into their town to really kind of start something exciting, I think of you guys. So thanks for being here this morning, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Travis.
Thanks for having us.
Brian, do you want to start, or would you like me to?
You're pretty good at starting things off, so go ahead.
Okay. All right. So yes, we are actually 3 fronts on Ludington Avenue. Sportsman's, the workforce, we call it. It has been around since 1955. It's my Grandpa Hoyt and Grandma Ann started it back then, and continued in the family in the late 70s. My grandpa had a massive heart attack, so my dad left college and came home to take over. So I grew up in the businesses and was just totally against going into the bar business. Then in 2008, we had the huge downturn in the economy, and I was graduating from Aquinas. I moved back from Grand Rapids and was working at the Chamber of Commerce down here in Ludington. And downtown Ludington was so different then. There really was very little investment or anything exciting really happening. There were a core group of volunteers with the DDA, with the Chamber, who were making efforts to get something going, to like bring life to the downtown, because vacancy rates were high, buildings were running down, the list goes on and on. So 2010-ish, I was on Michigan Festivals and Events Board. Brian and I were dating at the time, and we loved just traveling around throughout the state. We loved the state and knew that there was a lot of good that was happening. And I was, we say we were going through a midlife crisis. What do we want to do with our life? And we're sitting in Bell's and just loved the third place environment, that place between home and work, where you could meet people and find community. And we saw that firsthand there, and had, not only a really good time, but came up with the idea that, no, we don't want to open a brewery. Like, that's super expensive, and we don't know what we're doing. But
it
we
was
loved.
It was kind of centered around all of the breweries. Like, it was that feel, where it was welcoming. Like, you could bring your kids in. It wasn't necessarily a bar, but it just was very welcoming and comfortable. Yeah,
and people from all divides and cultures could talk and find common ground there. So we really loved that environment. We're like, well, maybe we could do that back home, and just do it simple. So we approached my parents in November of 2010 about our idea of only serving Michigan craft beer, wine, and spirits. We actually were going to do mostly I think 50-50 wine and beer at the time, because we also really liked wine.
Yep. And there was no real liquor distribution in Michigan at that point. There was some, but it wasn't really outside of where they were producing it.
Right. Obviously, that grew substantially, and now we have incredible distilleries in the state that we happily serve. But when we started in 2010, we were looking at a new, picking up a building in downtown, because their vacancy rates were so high. Well, my parents had a tenant in a space immediately to the east of Sportsman's that is connected. And they said, well, why don't you try it there? And we did. And actually, the tenant now is over in Kathy McLean, who's also listening in. They rent from her. So it all worked out. Another great retailer remained in downtown Ludington, and we were able to open our space. And
it was a larger space for him too, I believe.
Much nicer too.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. I'll say it was our building. So we convinced them to let us do this, and they helped us financially. We had a very small budget of $50,000. We did the work a lot of ourselves, chipping, away at all of the years of remodeling that people had done. So we started that the Monday after Easter,
yeah.
in May. Yep, in May. And then, so I don't know how, we opened June 27th softly, not 6 months after we came up with the idea. So what I think, Bri, you can add to this, but what sets the Mitten apart, or at least we believe so, is that through the journey of researching, actually building out the space, we shared our story and brought people along with it. So we were gaining like a community before we even were open.
Yep.
We also added the Mug Club, which we had seen at Founders and other places like that. And so it's the built-in community that, brings in revenue each year for mugs that we keep here on the back shelf. And we do special events with them, and we kind of let them be kind of leaders within the space. They create events themselves to hold, and it's really reaffirmed that third place community.
Yeah, it's a cool way how the community around it has grown kind of organically. We've had groups start doing like open mic nights on their own. We have a knitting group that comes in when we reopen, but every Tuesday, a big group of women and men and all sorts of people come in and just knit and drink beer. And it's pretty cool.
Yep.
But I think one of the keys was bringing people along from the beginning and letting them watch us build out the space and develop the concept, because it got them invested early on, and it made them feel like they were part of what we were building as well, which they were, because the whole basis of it was the community aspect.
Right. So we were open summer rush just in time of 2011, and it went shockingly very smooth. We didn't really have a food menu at the time, and just kind of, I don't know, flew by the seat of our pants, really.
Yeah, started simple and then kind of developed from there.
Yeah, and we like to say we created something that we definitely could not find here already. We did that selfishly. We wanted a place where we wanted to go, and it seems it really did fill a niche that was fill a hole that was missing within the community. 2 years later, we were. I was actually not at that point working for the DDA and also the chamber. I was a shared employee, and I was walking around the downtown talking about St. Patrick's Day stuff, and found out that the building immediately next to the Mitten was going to be opening up and available and on the market for sale. So we immediately jumped on it and said, well, we don't have a clue what we're going to do with the space, but it's just, well, why not? So we went through kind of a bidding war, but we ended up getting it. And through just brainstorming with my mom and some friends and the community we built at the Mitten, we came up with Barley and Rye, which again was something that offered entirely different menus and a different concept than you would find anywhere else in town. And that's really evolved. Like, we had no idea what we were doing, and it's turned into a pretty cool space that offers fresh casual food with a Mexican flair. It's a whiskey cocktail bar, and it's starting to compete revenue-wise with Sportsman's in our heavy months. So it's pretty exciting and really surprising that unexpected concept has done as well as it has. Anything else, guys?
I guess, and then most recently we underwent a giant renovation with our kitchen. So previously we had been operating out of two separate kitchens, one in the back of Barley and Rye and one in the front of Sportsman's. So to kind of consolidate and just make things more efficient, we combined the 2 kitchens in a separate space in the rear of the building. And that's been one of probably the best things we've done. Just for morale with employees, we created a much better work environment for them. And most recently, I guess, we're investing a lot in our employees because we know that that is one of the resources that we need to really keep an eye on because the labor market is getting more and more competitive. So we want to build a team that enjoys working here, that is challenged, that has all the tools they need to get the job done. So.
Yep. Yeah, I think, you know, that what furthers our investment into being a third place and is our commitment to our team. If someone doesn't want to work here, we willingly help them find somewhere they do want to work. Life is too short, and we really try to communicate that often. We are really involved, not this year because of COVID and cash flow restrictions, but really involved in our community with sponsoring, you know, school programs and helping at the alternative school with donations and really any way we can to stay invested in the community and help where we're able to.
And we started some kind of creative fundraising type things where we would do breakfast at Barley and Rye, and it was buy some, give some. So we would donate, it was like
20% of sales.
20% of all sales would go to a different nonprofit each time that we did it, which was kind of a fun way to get people in the morning and then also kind of help out some of the local nonprofits as well.
Yep.
For anybody who hasn't been there, I definitely recommend it. It's cool because like all the spaces are connected, and so it feels kind of, even though it's its own individual spaces, you know, it feels like kind of parts of a whole. It's really neat. And so I guess one question that I have, but before we move on is, you know, you guys talked about, you know, wanting to open a place that you would want to go to as a customer, you know, something that fit with kind of your desires and values and that sort of thing. Was there something that kind of made you decide to pull the trigger and do that instead of just like finding someplace out of town that you would frequent or whatever? It's like, because that I think is kind of for those who, including myself, who aren't immediately an entrepreneur, it's like that's like a mythical kind of thing. What is that X factor that makes someone decide, I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to put everything on the line to do this?
I would say this is all Brian. He is our driving force of entrepreneurship. I am definitely more the cautious one, and my mom was also all about the ideas, and if the two of them together were fairly unstoppable, and I just tried to make sure things got done. So Brian, you take it from here.
I mean, I guess we had the opportunity. It was kind of a no-brainer just because the space was there. We didn't have to purchase a new space to start the Mitten. So it was like the perfect kind of incubator to see if it would work. If it failed, the worst case, we found a new tenant and rented the space back out. So most of it was just the risk versus reward was a no-brainer. And we both were interested in seeing something like that happen in our community. So we just kind of jumped at it.
I mean, we were also really heavy at the time that like watching Gary Vaynerchuk videos about, you know, find your passion. Life is too short. Like, yes, keep your day job to pay your bills, but find something you really love to do. And I think, yeah, we had a lot of advantages, but I think the adventurous side and the joy of building a business, I think that's what Brian and I have really found that we like to do, is build the businesses. The day-to-day is not really our favorite, but we love building them from scratch.
Very cool. Being the catalyst. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much. And I'm looking forward to some questions and answers a little bit later. To kind of dovetail in, Megan and Brian talking about opportunity. Now to segue to Brian Stratton with SIPSy. I have to imagine that opportunity has been the name of the game for you, being a short-lived startup here, just this year in 2020. I stumbled across Brian and his company, him being right up the road in Caledonia, in one of those local community chatter pages. And I reached out and I'm like, hey, what's this concept? And it sounded really cool. We don't go through a lot of cans and bottles at our house right now, but we're stockpiling because I want to use you guys here pretty soon in the future. So thanks for being here, Brian, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen here real quick. And let me know if it's working for you guys or not.
Yep,
Can you see it, Travis?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, this will just be a few minutes, but I just wanted to go through basically two things with everyone on the call today. Is kind of, okay, what is SIPSy.com? So I'll briefly explain that, and then I'll spend more time on the journey. It's still a very new journey for us too, but the journey so far and some of the challenges and learnings, and and certainly in this journey, I have that what pushed me over the edge to take that leap as well. I agree. It's like, something before I did it, I always wondered what would it be that would push someone to do that as well. So, all right. So I just wanted to share a couple graphics on what is SIPSy.com. So in its simplest form, SIPSy.com is software that facilitates recycling by connecting Michigan households who would like to have their empty cans and bottles recycled with members of their community who would like to provide that service. So it's really similar when you think about it to the way Uber connects riders who need to get somewhere with drivers who are willing to take them there. And essentially this graphic on the left that you see, this kind of outlines the relationship between what are really our three biggest stakeholders in the business since we've launched, and that's local households, and then you've got local returners. And then on top of that, we've added in local businesses, nonprofits, and fundraisers as well. And so essentially the way it works is, a household's got bottles, right, that they want to recycle. If you don't want to go do it yourself, you can come into our app and submit a pickup request. And with that, it'll go into our internal marketplace where the team of local returners that have signed up with us will claim your order. They'll essentially come get it and recycle it. And then the output of that recycling is some cash for them as an income. And then also payment back to that local household who used our service. But then while that local household is submitting this pickup request, we also have this option to say you can get paid for your morning, or you could donate your money to one of the local businesses, nonprofits, or fundraisers that have signed up with us. And so if you had selected that, instead of that money going directly to you, if you did donate it, it'll actually go directly to that local nonprofit fundraiser or business. And then kind of the way the money works on our app is if you were a customer, we kind of have this graphic right on our main page, is how much will I be paid or donate. And so essentially, if you think of every bottle you have is worth 10 cents, right, in the state of Michigan, you as a household, you'll get paid. Or if you selected to donate, your donation amount that you will be giving to a charity will be 5 cents of that 10 cents. Your returner makes 4 cents on it. And then our technology fee for every bottle is a cent, essentially. And so, again, I said this is very new. We launched SIPSy, really a pilot in the Grand Rapids area of SIPSy about six weeks ago. And it's going well so far. So far, we've already generated $880 in donations to local nonprofits, small businesses, and fundraisers. We provided service to about 220 customers. So far, we've recycled over 100,000 cans and bottles. So far, we have 88 returners signed up across the state with us, and we have 28 of these organizations signed up with us as well for these local nonprofits and fundraisers too. Okay, so kind of getting into the journey. So the first thing is transforming the idea of this into a viable concept, and this is honestly it was what took the longest amount of time. So really, I had this idea about 10 years ago, but I didn't have the vision at the time to make it a viable concept. And really what I thought of is 10 years ago, I just hate recycling my cans and bottles. Why couldn't I just let somebody do this for me? I would gladly give them away. I don't feel good about throwing them away, right? Because I'm environmentally conscious, but I also hate going to the store and doing it. But I would give them away to somebody if they would come get them from me. Also, I would certainly be willing to part with half of the money and only take 5 cents a can and bottle as well. And so I spent actually, it was very brief, a few days, like, wow, how much money is there in this? And you start looking at it, and in the state of Michigan, there's about 4 billion cans and bottles every year, which generates $400 million in deposit value. So just in Michigan alone, and there's other states that have different deposit set up as well, but it's a pretty big market. And I thought, wow, why doesn't somebody have a business like this? And then you start getting into the logistics of, well, to really do that on a massive scale, you got to have employees, trucks, a lot of infrastructure, investment. That's a huge risk, and I'm a pretty risk adverse person. And at the time, I've been running a pretty large business, and you understand how even if you can generate a lot of revenue, your costs can really add up when you start looking at getting into all of those types of things. And so I kind of tabled the idea at the back of my head at that point and said, I get it. That would just be a ton of investment and a ton of work to do that. And it wasn't really until about 8 years later, and many Uber rides and many shipped grocery deliveries, after using services like that in the gig economy, that it really struck me again to say, why couldn't I take that type of a model and apply it to this can and bottle recycling thing? And then that gets rid of all this, investment requirement and takes a lot of the risk away from it. And so that's when I really think I developed a viable concept potentially. But then we had to go from this viable concept into an actual viable product. And there were obviously a lot of constraints that any entrepreneur would come across when we were doing that time. And so before I started Sipsy.com, I enjoyed a very great, stable job for 14 years as director of innovation for a large multinational billion-dollar company. And I worked a lot as well. So when am I going to have the time to actually create this product? And then money, as I said before, I'm pretty risk adverse with my money. And I'm also not comfortable taking other people's money if I'm not willing to put my own money in, to test out a concept. So, that wasn't really a viable option for me to go out and try and find investment from people for it. So I really kind of set in my mind, it's got to be done cheaply. I got to figure out a way to do it cheaply. And that takes me to the last part, which was skill set. So really to develop the software that we have, you'd be well over $1 million to pay, a software development firm to take on a project like that, and it would take a very long time. And certainly my background is in, my formal education is in mechanical engineering, and you don't, get into software development as a skill set in that. So I didn't have the skill set to develop this product that we needed. And kind of really the way I summed all of these up is, from a time standpoint, I ended up just working nights and weekends over a long period of time, a couple of years to do this. I started to develop the skill set myself. To become a software developer. I actually parlayed this opportunity into a transition in my work role when I moved into this role of innovation, that in order to do that role well at my work, I needed to develop the skill sets that I also needed in parallel to develop Sipsy.com. And so I eventually ended up spending almost all of my days during work developing the same skills that I would need to then at night work on Sipsy.com. And because of that skill set, now I didn't actually need a ton of money to launch this business and see, how it would do. And ultimately, I eventually also ended up partnering with a local developer, as well as up in Rockford, Michigan, who's a developer and entrepreneur. And that really pushed it over the edge, where he brought on this amazing skill set, and as well as, the amount of time with us both tackling it together allowed us to finish it. So the next thing is the launch. So this is kind of gets into the question that Travis had asked earlier. What caused me to step over the edge? And I'll tell you, I didn't willingly necessarily step over the edge. It required a push, which, I think from my understanding happens a lot with entrepreneurs too, which, essentially I found taking that leap of faith to start my own business, particularly one like Sipsy, where there's not really a blueprint to follow, was probably the greatest challenge of all. And, I've heard a lot of small businesses were born out of necessity, and Sipsy won't be any different, essentially. So there were really two specific events that kind of drove the launch of Sipsy.com. The first one being the COVID-19 pandemic. So, as we talked about earlier, sometimes these, you wouldn't think that's an opportunity, right? But it was for me, because I had been thinking about this idea long before the pandemic, but once the pandemic hit and we shut down the recycling centers, we were building up this enormous backlog of cans and bottles, right, that people were going to need to recycle. And I thought, gosh, that kind of pushed me to say, okay, you got to get going on this. You're not spending enough time on it. You got to get focused on it. And then that paired with this idea that because a lot of people don't want to go to stores and risk getting the virus, they're also using a lot more services like Shipt and those grocery delivery services. And so can you imagine now you don't even go to the grocery store anymore, but you're going to try and go recycle cans and bottles at the grocery store when you have your groceries delivered. So I thought, I think there's a long-term trajectory where people will be less and less likely to go to the store. And I knew, having a service like this would reduce congestion inside stores as well, which would ultimately potentially help reduce spread of the virus. So it's really those two things with COVID. And then the second part related to what pushed me over the edge, which is also related to COVID, was in September, I ended up losing my job because of a downturn in business from COVID. So I no longer had that safe cushion, right, of a well-paying job and, and all of that. And so I really said, well, it's now or never. I can go back out and get another job right now and spend all my time doing that, or I'll really focus for the next 3 or 4 months on getting this thing launched and starting it. And, I made that decision to do it. But really, if it weren't for those two things, I don't think I'd be here today talking to you guys. And the other thing I wanted to touch on was kind of listening and adapting. And so we have this, again, we're very new, 6 weeks old, but we have this relentless policy of getting feedback from everybody who uses our app, whether you're the returner, whether you're the nonprofit organization, or whether you're a customer. And I'll give you an example of how that's already helped us from the beginning. And so within 2 days of launching, probably around the time I connected with you, Travis, originally, we immediately started seeing over and over and over again that a significant portion of the communities that we were servicing wanted to use their cans and bottles to support local nonprofits and businesses. And by then, essentially, within a couple of days of that, we completely added a whole new section to our app, the whole idea of allowing these donations. We knew we always wanted to kind of get into how could we support the community and stuff, but we didn't recognize until we got this feedback very clearly from people after the first 2 days of launch that they want to be able to do that. And so that's when we launched that ability to, okay, you don't have to take the money from your cans and bottles, you can donate them to an organization. And then that led to, all right, let's sign up some organizations. And that led to what is ultimately our main marketing driver at this point in time. And you wouldn't think about it. A lot of these organizations that sign up think, well, what's the catch? It's free and you're just going to send me money? Like we send them digital checks instantly when someone uses our service, and they wonder, I don't get it. What's in it for you to do that? And ultimately, what's in it for us is, besides the idea of being charitable, which is great too, is that these organizations end up being like our #1 marketers in their local area. So once you're added into our app as an organization, there's now incentive for you to communicate with your local supporters that use this. One of the ways you can help and support us is to take those empty cans and bottles you got sitting around your house and turn those into cash for us. And they love the idea that they don't have to collect these cans and do something with them. They just get sent checks digitally through their email whenever these come in. And so that's really ended up being a win-win-win-win scenario for all, SIPC and all three of our biggest stakeholders in the organization. One of the things we're struggling with right now is expansion. So, we've got this upcoming challenge of when and how should we continue to expand. We're servicing a fairly large circle around Grand Rapids right now, actually a little all the way out to Lakeshore in some cases. But I found this quote that I put on here online the other day, actually yesterday, that I thought was interesting. And so to all the entrepreneurs out there, build a business where you have a 25% chance of reaching 200K to $1 million in revenue versus building a company with a 0.01% chance of becoming a unicorn. And so that's kind of sticking with me. It's something I'm still digesting right now is, we have literally had 10,000 requests across the state of Michigan, all the way through the UP and over in Detroit to use our service. We keep track of when they come in through our website. And it's really tempting to go, all right, let's just expand. And we've got returners signed up all across the state that may service these things, but we're really struggling with this idea of, should we do that really fast, or should we focus on penetrating as much as we can in one market first, that being the greater Grand Rapids area, and kind of perfect the product before we start expanding. And so that's something we're struggling with now. And then the last thing I'll say is, as I've gone through this journey more and more, I've definitely realized success or failure, I still win. So what I mean by that is I used to manage hundreds of employees at my prior job. And one of the things that stood out for me over the years was our top performers always had one thing in common. They had an entrepreneurial mindset. And so for that reason, I ended up always looking for resumes where candidates had tried to start their own business and failed. And those candidates would essentially go to the top of my list because I valued that over even education and skill. There's just no experience or no substitute for that experience of having started your own company. And so on a personal level, I look at it as regardless of what happens with Sipsy.com, I will take everything I've learned and will continue to learn as we go down this journey with me forward in my career and become, you know, an even more valuable asset, whether that's for this company or another company in the future. So yeah, with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Travis.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. That's really cool stuff to think about. And it's like when I first mentioned it to my team that you were going to be a part of this, it was kind of like, man, this is something that it seems like, why hadn't somebody come up with this before? It seems like such a natural, you know, sort of thing, but it's like, you know, like you said, you had been thinking about it 10 years ago and it just took that combination of things to push you over the edge and get you going. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, hopefully it continues to just be really, really awesome for you. So we're gonna kind of tie up our presentations here today with my colleagues Julie and Jody. I wasn't really familiar with this programming that they're going to talk about until I came on board at the right place about a year ago, and have been completely blown away with what a catalyst it's been for some startup businesses in their communities. So go ahead, ladies, floor is yours.
Okay. Again, I'm Jody Nichols. I, through the right place, serve Lake and Oceana counties. And it's great to hear, I think this is a really good segue to hear from two entrepreneur businesses that really took the uniqueness of Michigan and turned it into thriving businesses for yourselves. And what we're going to talk about a little bit today is how our rural communities can kind of foster that in their small communities. And I am going to just simply introduce my colleague, Julie Burrell, for the sake of time, and also because really the program she's going to talk about, Pitch North and Grow North, were completely her brainchild and children. And you know, I am just very grateful to her for implementing these awesome ideas and these great programs and allowing Lake and Oceana counties to benefit. I have to put a shout out to my Oceana friends on the call. Both, it's been in place for 2 years, and both years we've had some top finalists from Oceana County, including the winner this year. And this year for first, we had our first Lake County finalist as well. So what I am seeing with those finalists is not only the dollars that they were able to put to use for their business ideas or their business startups and the benefit that has given them, but also the recognition that their businesses have received from being part of that program. And also, maybe even most importantly, the being embraced by the community and the support and the recognition of their great idea from the communities that are supporting them has really taken them far. So I just will, at this point, just kind of turn it over to Julie to run with our presentation on engaging your rural community in entrepreneurism.
Thanks, Jody. Yeah, some really great presentations today. I really enjoyed everyone sharing your stories. So, you know, as we kind of get into our presentation, I think it's really so easy, especially this year, for everyone to focus on the negative. I mean, we all know that there will be a business or multiple businesses that close in our communities due to the pandemic. But I think it's also really important, as I'm an eternal optimist, to focus on the bright side. And so I ran across this information just a couple days ago, and looking on a national scale, per the census, the US Census, entrepreneurship is up. So a census report from the third quarter shows that the number of new businesses in the United States has hit an all-time high, which is pretty incredible. And looking at Michigan specifically, we're up 51% for new businesses in 2020. So here at The Right Place, we typically focus on the manufacturing sector and our community's largest employers. But I just wanted to dive a little bit deeper and show why our focus and all of you as community leaders that are on the call should be really focusing to support entrepreneurs. So this slide here is a look at Newaygo County specifically, just breaking down that overall number of establishments and where those jobs are. So as you can see on the top graph, the total number of jobs in Newaygo County is made up from small businesses, which are under 10 employees, and then small to medium, which is under 50 as the majority. Of course, we do have some major employers that we're, incredibly grateful for as well. But that big portion is those small and medium businesses. And then the bottom graph depicts the total percent of all businesses, where it's pretty obvious that that small business under 10 employee pretty much takes the cake here in Newaygo County. And this data is from youreconomy.org, and you can check, it has county specific data for the entire country. So you can check that too. And so these businesses all start somewhere, and that is really where our entrepreneurial focus has been. So back in 2018, like many of these entrepreneurs on the screen here, I had an idea. And so I wanted to bring a pitch competition to our rural community. And being a former entrepreneur myself, I knew how tough it was to really get started because really most of all the resources that are available to entrepreneurs are in places like Muskegon or Grand Rapids or Lansing or Detroit or wherever, but really nothing was in, the rural communities that we live in. And so I took a chance at writing a grant for the first time and happened to be successful. So we received funding from the West Michigan Regional Prosperity Alliance and Northern Initiatives to host our first ever pitch competition, which was in May of 2019. And as Jody alluded to, it was a multi-county collaborative and was open to anyone who lives in Newaygo, Oceana, or Lake County. We had about 50 attendees to the first for the first event and 20 entrepreneurs who submitted their ideas, which fully exceeded my expectations. I was hoping we'd have 10 people who wanted to submit their idea, and we had 20, so that was really great. And these on the screen here are all the finalists, happen to be all women, and each one of them ended up walking away with money to drive their business forward. And fast forwarding to 2020, like so many of the businesses we serve, we had to pivot. Pitch North went virtual, and we had to expand our fundraising. And thanks to all the sponsors that you see here, we were able to pull it off again and provided a little bit over $9,000 in prize money. So the format was the same. We had our 5 judges. The finalists had 5 minutes to pitch their business. This time they just had to do it via Zoom. And here are some examples of some of the slides that were shown during the presentations. So we weren't sure how Pitch North was going to go virtually, but the results were pretty impressive. We happened to have a 40% increase in entrepreneur submissions and a 14% increase in attendance. I think it's really easy for communities and even business leaders to be skeptical of supporting a competition like this because it's a cash grant. There's no reporting that we're requiring. The winner could run off and buy a new motorcycle and we'd have no recourse. But, really just kind of looking at this impact that we were able to have. Through these events, we not only supported these budding entrepreneurs by awarding nearly $18,000, but we gave back to local vendors as well. We were able to bring in over $20,000 in sponsorships to the community. And of all these are the finalists from both years. So of all of these finalists, only one of these businesses has closed. And it was due to the pandemic. And if she would have been able to hold off another month and get into that summer season, she would have had her best year because she was really tourism and camping focused. And I think we all have seen this year how so many people went camping that never had before, and she would have definitely benefited from that. And anecdotally, I would say at least 80% of them have had growth in their business, and some really substantially since the competitions. So after you have the pitch competition, then what? So one of the things that we saw is, after we had that first competition, it's kind of like we got everyone really excited about entrepreneurship and thinking about starting a business, but then it was like, okay, well, what now? And so we decided to keep on going, and we wanted to support those winners and then cultivate more participants for the next competition the following year. So between years 1 and 2, we got some funding from Northern Initiatives and the Fremont Area Community Foundation, and Grow North was born. So basically, it was a curated series of entrepreneur support events. They were free to attend. You got a free gift and a free beer, and they were limited to only 15 attendees per session, and every single one of them filled up. So as you can see from this slide, the feedback was really great. We had a mix of entrepreneurs, pretty heavy on the current business owner side, but we also had a good number of people who were in that planning or just thinking about it stages. And I think that they really benefited from the content that we shared, and then also the networking. And what I found most exciting about these events was the true entrepreneurial ecosystem that was built from the networking during these events. They started as kind of that quiet sit and listen type of a thing, but then ended with folks ending up buying products from each other and collaborating on projects and really developing, friendships throughout their entrepreneurial journeys. So overall, through the Grow North series, we impacted 29 unique entrepreneurs. So many of them did end up attending more than one session, which wasn't something I anticipated going into it. And one of our finalists for Pitch North in 2020 happened to be a regular attendee of these as well. So wrapping up, we really wanted to highlight the impact that some of this type of programming can make in your community. So the total budget for these pitch competitions was only around $12,000, and really the majority of that went to prize money, and they range from $500 to $4,000. And so Jody's gonna jump in and kind of take over here to wrap it up, but we wanted to just share some of the feedback that we got from some of the finalists for this year. So this person right here, her name is Janet. She bought a business a couple years ago that had been in business for nearly 2 decades in very rural Bitely, Michigan, and she won $500. And this is kind of, this is her feedback here, really just talking about what, like Jody said at the beginning, what that exposure meant, and just kind of that community coming around them and being supportive. And then Jody, you want to take over from here?
Sure. I'm just going to kind of touch on the last couple of quotes that are from an Oceana and a Lake County finalist. And so the quote we have here is from Amber, who is with Hearth Magic, and just really timely that she submitted and ended up being our top finalist in this year's Pitch North. Her business is actually an online programming for homeschool families. And so not surprisingly, her business is just growing exponentially this year. And so for her to receive, kind of that influx of some extra capital and extra support at a time when the community really needs her to kind of step up and increase the offering she has really been amazing. And you can read her quote yourself, but she was chosen as a finalist for, and one of the reasons was her ability to ramp up very quickly with the winnings and the obvious need in our current environment, as well as the fact is when things do return to normal, where she is planning to bring a homeschool conference to Pentwater, which it will be a big boost to our community. So those were kind of some of the factors that our judges looked at in making her our top finalist this year. I'm really excited about this one. So I serve Lake County, and for those of you that know Lake County, it's a beautiful, beautiful area that really centers on its natural resources and tourism. This particular business is actually the only access that Lake County has to fresh fruits and vegetables. And so just really was excited to see Paul be able to use his winnings to expand his business, which is Right on 10 in Chase, Michigan. He's doing, you know, great things, not just for his business, but for the community with that offering of fruits and vegetables and the various state programs for seniors and low income. So it was just really exciting to see that he had, you know, some of the plans he has to continue to expand for the community and not just himself, but also I think especially, and I think of all of the finalists, Paul was the one that really benefited the most from that reassurance that the community is excited to have him and wants to help him succeed, because he is a young entrepreneur that just kind of saw the need, was a Lake County native, and wanted to fill that gap and wasn't really sure how it would take off. And I just checked in with him the other day. It's definitely taking off. So, you know, that's kind of the feedback I have on my county finalists. We would love at this point if you have any questions on any part of the presentation. But I do see that we're hitting 9:30, so I'm going to let Travis kind of run from here. Thanks.
Yeah, I know. Thank you guys very much. And Julie, I hadn't seen those stats that you started off with. That's really encouraging stuff to see that trend going. So that's even more kind of underscores the opportunity that I think, you know, our communities have to really try to foster, you know, this sort of thing. And that kind of goes into one of the questions that came through the chat to me is, and this goes for any of our presenters today. You know, we have a lot of municipal leadership that's been part of the conversation, been part of the call today. If there's one thing that a community can do to be supportive of entrepreneurs like yourselves, and I know, you know, the mitten and barley and rye is a very different type of business than SIPSI is. One is very geographic oriented, and one is, you know, you could probably do anywhere. If there's one thing that you would recommend a community do to be more entrepreneur friendly, what would that be? I know it's a loaded question, but.
I have one right off the top of my head. When this was more not for the opening of the businesses, but for the massive rehab project we did with Shifting Kitchens. We ran into a lot of challenges with, so it's a huge investment for us to add a new hood system in all of that. But we ran into challenges with the inspectors. And so unfortunately, our DDA, Heather at the city, who does community development, she worked with our new city manager, Mitch, who's terrific. And they helped kind of smooth the way for us to be able to do that, because we were looking at stoppages of the project that would have killed the budget. I mean, what else would you say, Brian?
We ran into that with a mitten as well.
And barley, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. So just making that more accessible, I guess.
More information available. We unfortunately were told, go get the code book and look it up. I think a big, which was, I have a full-time job outside this, and we're not contractors. That's why we hire them. And if anything, our investment made the structure of the building safer. We were by no means wanting to put people's lives in jeopardy, but it was very challenging, to say the least. We have a lot of gray hair now because of it. And I would say working more to help foster a team environment versus us versus them.
Yeah, and I would say some of the grant programs, the kind of entrepreneurial challenge business plan competitions, that's also a really great thing to start doing. And trying to get started, because that kind of fosters that community of people that want to try and start things, but maybe don't have all of the resources. So outside of the monetary that they can get out of it, they also get some really great networking with other people with the same mindsets.
I'll add something real quick, Travis. I guess, like you said, from a SIPSI standpoint, it's hard to pinpoint it on a very local scale, but I think from my standpoint, it's honestly things like this, local organizations and local, authorities supporting things like this that help drive connections in that local community would probably be the most valuable thing for us with SIPSI. For example, I'm constantly now looking for new small businesses that might be struggling and nonprofits and things like that would like to get signed up so that our customers can donate to them. And the ability to make those connections within a local community is important to me. And so that's one way from my perspective.
Well, and Brian, if you're eyeing different areas of West Michigan to expand geographically, you got quite a geography represented on the call this morning, so we know how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I'd love to be able to reach out to, a local government and, or townships and things like that and say, hey, I'm looking to expand into your area. I'm going to bring jobs with this. And also I'd like to, support some community organizations. Can you give me contacts and things like that? Exactly.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Julie, Jody, anything you want to add? No? Okay. All right. Are there any, that was the question that I got through the chat. Are there any other questions anybody has today before we wrap up?
It looked like Claudia had a question in the chat. If you want to go, Claudia.
I did. It was to the sports bar and mitten when you're talking about what would be helpful. I'm both on council and DDA, and I'm in charge of trying to write our community economic development plan. Jody's going to give some help. But one of the things I've put down as an objective is to write a guidebook for new business. Is that kind of what you're referring to, where you just didn't know what you needed?
So our building was built late 1800s. So where we struggled was that to bring our building up to code is extremely expensive, right? So we had to do a whole code review, and fortunately, with an architect, we were able to identify the areas where we could make changes. But a resource guide would truly be helpful. I would say because we were, my family's been in business for a long time, we were knowledgeable about people we should talk to in the resources for new people in the community or for new people trying to open a business. I think a resource guide would, be extraordinarily helpful. I think for our perspective, what would have been helpful was more of a working together mentality versus trying. It was very I don't know, what am I trying to say, Brian? They were against, like the inspector was against us versus trying to help us.
Just kind of too regulatory in mindset.
I think that really depends on your zoning administrator to an extent. I mean, we've had some changes in Pentwater over the last 5 years, and what we have now is incredibly different than what we had before in terms of encouraging people. And that makes a huge difference. I mean, people used to come into Pentwater and want to do something, and the old zoning administrator would say, oh, no, you can't get that. It'd be like, wait, oh, what? Versus this one will say, well, let's sit down and see how we can make that happen. So,
and it's more it's a balancing act, because yes, you want to get things updated and up to code, but at the same time, if the business is willing to invest and expand their operations, and they recognize that, we need to improve things, but we can't afford to improve them all the way, at least letting them get halfway there and continue to improve instead of black and white, you need to do this or else you can't do it.
Right.
Another thing that just kind of crossed my mind is maybe even like a business development liaison where they're available to kind of guide you wherever you need to go. I think with creating a guidebook, it's a great idea, but the dynamics of each business could be totally different. And
Yeah.
I don't know that it would be cohesive enough to cover everything. So maybe
Right.
having a resource where someone can go to talk to
Good
get.
idea. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, great question and good elaboration on that. So we are a little about 10 minutes over, and I want to respect everybody's time. I know everybody's busy. I definitely want to thank our speakers today. Thank you guys so much for your time this morning. Brian, good luck with SIPSy. I'm looking forward to trying it out when we have a critical mass, in our garage of cans and bottles to use you guys. And Brian and Megan, best of luck to you guys. Hopefully you guys are able to welcome people in your doors again soon. I know so much is based on the experience there and the live music and that third place. And so I have to imagine things are tough, but hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So best of luck to you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for being here. Like I said, we'll shoot out an email with a link to this recording. Feel free to share it far and wide. And take care, everybody, and have a great holiday season. Thanks
Take
a lot.
care.
Have a good day.
Bye.